feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the DaneMoore NBA podcast, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Thursday morning. It's April 17th, and coming up on today's show, we have burning questions and X factors for this Wolves-Lakers series with Kyle Theige. Before we get started, let you know that today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and Falling Knife is the spot to watch Wolves-Lakers Game 1. They have the TV truck outside in the parking lot there. You can bring your own chair, post up outside. It looked like a blast last season. When everybody was out there watching. Be a little chillier maybe this time. Bring a hoodie, bring a jacket. But I can't think of a better place to watch Game 1. And they do have inside seating as well. You can go to the tap room and watch on the projection screens and TVs in there as well. But Falling Knife Brewing Company, Northeast Minneapolis, that is the spot to watch Game 1, Wolves-Lakers. All right, we are now joined by Kyle Theige for some burning questions and X factors for this Wolves-Lakers series. I've done a lot of pods this week, but I haven't done one with you, I don't think, since we knew that this is going to be Wolves-Lakers for the playoffs. What's up? You ready for LA?
I am. Like I said, we started this thing in LA 6 or 7 months ago. Game 1 of the regular season, and now it's Game 1 of the postseason. And I think you and Jace did a really good job on Monday of just kind of setting the table of like, okay, how did we get here? Where are we at? And then obviously you and Britt, two of the best, really hit, I think, the basketball side of this and all the different matchups and maybe chess pieces. But I think today, and I think it leads to a basketball conversation, it's kind of fun to talk about some questions going into this series that not only are big picture questions, short-term questions, but I think they're also going to kind of affect and determine how this series plays out. A series that, again, as I woke up this morning, and we'll get into this, but there's just a real strong sense once again of little brother syndrome. Even when I checked the Ringer today, it wasn't just like they don't even talk about this series. It's just like, yeah, if the Lakers fly over country, right? Like once they get through Minnesota, how are they going to match up against, the Nuggets or the Clippers? So, yeah, I'm excited to get into this. I think there's some really interesting topics that haven't been discussed yet about Wolves-Lakers.
Trying to find Ant's quote yesterday about being the underdogs. Here's Ant's response to that.
Do you feel like you guys have been overlooked, especially making a Western Conference Finals run last year?
No, I love it. Yeah.
Why?
I just love it. Yeah, it's dope. I mean, I love the fact that everybody want the Lakers to win. That's how it's supposed to be. They don't want the Timberwolves to win. I get it.
That put some gas in your tank when you heard that one, Kyle.
It's true. It does feel like they ended the season much stronger. The regular season, the Timberwolves did that they did last season when they kind of stumbled and gave up their ground and ended up being in a 3-6 matchup against the Suns. But I'm just going to be honest as we kind of get into these questions because I know there's a lot of Legoat 69s that are tuning in for this episode this week. I have a lot of respect for this Lakers team, and I want to talk about their coaching staff and some of their players, but I just didn't have respect for the Suns last year, and that's why I said Suns or Wolves in 5. And I was wrong, but we're kind of back to square one of everyone doubting this team that won one less game than the Lakers did. And I know they have Luka. I don't think this team is as good as the Mavs team that beat the Wolves in 5 last year in the Western Conference Finals. So, yeah, that's my setup. But if you want to start getting into some X factors and things that could really flip this series in Minnesota's favor, I'm ready to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the point of X factors or questions like this in advance of it. It's like these little things that, make marginal difference, and can shift things a couple percentage points one way or the other. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think you would say, this is a series that makes sense to be close. It maybe makes sense for the Lakers to be slight favorites in it, because they do have home court. But the point of this is these are the things that if they go in the Wolves' favors or the questions answer in the Wolves' favor, the X factors move in the Wolves' direction, it's not that hard to have those odds kind of shift the other direction. And I don't think I think with the Lakers versus the Wolves and, whatever, it depends on who you're reading or listening to or whatever. It seems to me, to your point, that a lot of the things that the Wolves weren't good at during the regular season are being assumed to maybe not be successful during the playoffs. And I feel like there's less of that energy applied to the Lakers, who also have had, issues in an imperfect roster and areas that make this team sometimes when you watched it over the last 30 games or whatever, you go, yeah, this doesn't look like the Dallas Mavericks of last season. Obviously, there's different factors and stuff here, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's just and we've talked about it a little bit with like the bigs and some of the areas that the Lakers have been deficient since Luka went on the team. And maybe it's me too, I'm putting more of a microscope on the things that I know the Wolves struggled with versus the things that the Lakers struggled with. But I don't know that the Lakers are always looked at under a more objective sort of microscope. You know what I mean? So that's why I don't know. We're looking into this thing, trying to find out like something that resembles a little bit more towards the truth. I love trying to find out the things that aren't working about the Wolves. I love, and what are the things that can be shifted there. I just, I think the Lakers have areas that they're susceptible to, and it would be ridiculous for us not to, or anybody to not be considering that and just be like, yeah, it's LeBron and Luka, so they're going to win. Like, I think we know enough to know that is not enough in the NBA in 2025. We have a lot of examples of that.
And that's not how the trade, when it happened 2 months ago and broke all of our brains, that's not how people who covered the Lakers said that, right? Because there's a lot of people that are now saying Lakers in 5, flyover country. How will they match up in the second round? Do they love being on OKC's other side of the bracket? That when Luka was traded for in LA said, oh, this is probably one of those, we had to do it once in a generation trade, but the Lakers are probably taking a step back for more of a long-term vision, right? Mm-hmm. Like the same people that love the Lakers now were like, I don't know if LeBron and Luka can play together. Right. And now that duo is why they're just picking them to kind of crush the Wolves. So do you want to throw it?
Yeah, you go first. You can go.
So my biggest X factor, if you were to say question number one, like what is the biggest X factor for either each team or Minnesota or the Lakers? And this is going to be my answer for all my questions. I think there's a case to be made that this is the biggest playoff series of Rudy Gobert's career. Mm-hmm. And that this isn't, I don't know if you saw like Clippers Nuggets. That's going to be a great series. They got the NBA TV treatment. This entire playoff schedule is built around the Lakers. And I'm not like conspiracy guy or whatever. There's a lot of extra days built in, but every Lakers Wolves game is going to be simulcast on, Starlink. Like this thing is a big deal. And if Rudy Gobert, again, I think this Lakers team has a lot of different options that help Luka be awesome, but this is not the Mavs front court that really gave the Wolves hell last year. There's no one to really stop Rudy. They have tremendous guard play and Austin Reeves and LeBron and Rui and DFS, but there's really no one to stop him. He's going to have a lot of front court matchups, even if they go small, that are kind of like what he dominated in these last 20 games where, it was against a lot of, bottom feeders. But if Rudy Gobert, after this series is done, averages like 15 and 12, and they can't play him off the court, and he's just dominating offensive rebounds, and he's doing it in front of Kendrick Perkins and Shannon Sharp and and Gilbert Arenas and all these people, like that's going to completely change, I think, the narrative around him. And I think he is one factor for this team that it's like, if he can continue to do what we saw him do since he came back from his injury against, smaller front lines. But again, the Lakers have a small front line. I think he could have the biggest narrative shift benefit and be a big, big reason why the Wolves can, I guess, as a 6-3 upset the Lakers.
Yeah, one of my questions too was just, will small ball actually be a problem for Rudy Gobert in this series? And I have some thoughts on that. But Rudy was asked about it at practice yesterday. I thought this was a great answer about on that specifically.
The podcast and whatnot, and they're like, "Oh, Lakers play small, that could be a problem for Rudy." Even when we've seen that not be the case many times, do you like that the narrative kind of stays where it is?
I mean, it's all right. I don't mind it. They probably seen that clip, that step back 1,000 times. So did I. So, but yeah, this is one clip amongst a lot of other defensive possessions, and that's why I know a lot of people don't like the numbers, but the numbers a lot of times speak more than. Over a long period of time, the numbers speak more than the eye test, and it's going to be up to us to be able to be consistent with our approach, and yes, I mean, I'm going, it's like my whole career, I'm very likely to be crossed over, very likely to people are going to hit some tough shots over me, and then I might get dunked on, and all that stuff might happen, but let's see what happens over the course of hundreds and hundreds of possessions.
It does take a lot for a good defense clip to go viral.
It does, especially when I'm part of it.
I like that answer. I do think people have been watching the Wolves and following this team, closely for the past couple of years, right, Kyle? Like, especially last season during the regular season, we saw repeatedly at the end of games in fourth quarters, the Wolves moved to a switching defense that put Rudy in isolation against a lot of players like Luka, like the version of that team's Luka, the heliocentric player. I'm just off the top of my head. I remember there was at least one on the mellow ball right at the end of the game when they played the Hornets one time. Steph, he had on. I mean, there's just a ton of examples of it last season, which really, like, personally seeing it many, many times and not just looking at the numbers, because we do know that the numbers historically always say that, like, Rudy in isolation situations is significantly better than what our minds like sort of tell us surrounding this narrative with him. And, and Luka did get him in on that crossover in the Western Conference Finals in game 2 to seal that game. We often forget that Rudy also switched on to him the possession right before that and, executed that coverage effectively, and the Mavs didn't score, which is kind of the point of Rudy's question there, right? Or it's his point there is, it's like, we don't necessarily look at the numbers of what it is in the aggregate and remember the loud ones. So I say that to mean, like, I think we understand that is nowhere near him getting switched onto Luka or somebody on the perimeter is nowhere near the problem the narrative suggests it is. But I do think we've gone too far with this and just been like, nah, dude, small ball's not an issue. Like, small ball is and has been an issue for Rudy Gobert because it's on the offensive side of the floor. Rudy Gobert teams have been hurt by small ball lineups due to his inability to punish that on the offensive side of the floor. When a team's going small, right, they're not going to really play and pick and roll coverage against Rudy Gobert. They're just going to switch it, right? They got 5 similar size people to do it, and that kind of neutralizes some of Rudy's screening value. So he needs to provide value for you offensively elsewhere. Well, if it was a typical big, it was like, Nikola Vucevic or something, like, all right, maybe like play him in the post, like post him up on this 6'6" guy. Well, that's not Rudy's game, Rudy can't do that. Rudy needs to find other ways to be impactful on the offensive side of the floor when they do go small. And that is, if we're being honest and fair, is a true open question.
Absolutely.
In this right now, if he can do that. I will say, for people who haven't been watching the Wolves consistently since Rudy Gobert returned from his back spasm injury like 6 weeks ago, that's the shit that he's been doing for 6 weeks, is that they have kind of moved away from him being like the Utah version of Rudy Gobert, which is screen and roll and, trying to find him on the lobs. And they're using him more as like a offensive rebounder guy, a force on the interior. And obviously the offensive rebounding numbers have been elite. I'd said, he's more doing his Steven Adams game than Clint Capella if we use centers from, a decade ago. Rudy has to do that because Rudy has to punish the Lakers offensively when he's on offense for going small, and then needs to do what he's historically done, which is be, plenty competent defensively on switches there. But he has to prove that again as well at, 32 years old, whatever. Those are both requirements for Rudy and the Wolves to counter, LA small ball look.
I was so glad that you pointed out that second possession before the possession of game 2 when Rudy got against Luka. Game-winning 3. I don't believe that play lives in infamy, though, if the Wolves win that series. And to come back to this, everything you just said is kind of why I make Rudy Gobert not only X factor, but also I think he has the most to gain of basically any player in this series, because if he gets played off the court, in my opinion, it's going to be because offensively he's giving them nothing, and then defensively, whatever. But if he can give them the Wolves what he gave them the last, like you said, 6 weeks offensively, again, against a Lakers roster that has a ton of strengths, but their front line is not one of them. If he can attack the offensive glass, get a lot of putbacks, get some of his own tip dunks, I mean, there is no Derek Lively for him to have to worry about. So I know we're watching the exact same play that broke my heart again for the 1,000th time on YouTube here, but he got on that last possession by Luka, but the one before he played phenomenal defense. And you're right, the LaMelo Ball, the Steph Curry, there's a lot of defensive possessions where he has been isolated at the top, and he has done enough to make his opponent take a tough shot. And not everyone's going to hit him like Luka can. So I just think going into this, I know we're going to talk about Ant and LeBron and the coaching dynamics of all this stuff, but man, whatever happens in a single game highlight will go crazy viral. But if the Wolves can win this series, and a lot of it is because they had no answer for Rudy on the Wolves offensive side of the floor, I think that changes a lot about how this man is kind of looked at, because the last time you saw him in the highest moment, he was getting cooked, or at least that was the perception on a national level.
Give me another one.
X Factor, can I hit you with another question?
Either or.
I'm trying to figure out. I just really like JJ Redick. I remember being at Staples game 1. It was like, we got the Rudy Gobert extension news, and I was trying to find you because it hadn't broke yet. And I was like running around the tunnel behind Staples, and I go by like this AAU locker room because Staples Center has like 50 locker rooms, and there was like 30 assistant coaches in there, all on laptops, just analytically nerding out right before the game. I think Redick has an awesome staff. I think he does a really good job. I have low expectations for player coaches or first-year guys, and I think he's just blown everything out of the water. He's been awesome. So I'm just trying to figure out on either side what could be the first major chess piece move, because that's what I love about this playoff stuff, right? Like, you take all the narratives and off-season stuff off the table. It's really just a chess match between two teams that are going to make adjustments. And I think for Finch, the first one that comes to mind, and I don't know if it'll be the first move he makes, but is it like demoting Mike to the bench and starting Nikhil and then letting Mike kind of run more second unit stuff? That would be the big one. If Rudy doesn't give you what I just said in segment 1 about good offense or attacking the offensive glass, is it just a major shift to a lot of Nas and Julius at the 4 and 5? And then on the Lakers side, the obvious one there is they're probably going to start Jackson Hayes, but how much do they do that before they just say, you know what, actually our best ingredient, our best recipe is just playing small ball? So I don't know have you thought about that all week in terms of if there was maybe a coaching change or a coaching move or a chess piece that we haven't talked about that's not just adjusting your starting 5?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the adjusting the starting 5-1 just with Hayes. And I think like on Monday when we just got the series and we talked about some of the different ways that they could match up, and I brought up the idea of, do they have to start Jackson Hayes? Because if they do start Jackson Hayes, then who's guarding Ant? Is this Rui Hachimura guarding him, or are you going to actually put LeBron on him to have him be the primary there? Like, I don't know. If I'm the Lakers, that's not that isolated. Doesn't seem like a great idea to go with. But I think, and so then what I brought up was, well, you could start Jared Vanderbilt, right? And then Rui's like your 5, or Vanderbilt's your 4, however you want to look at it like that. And Vanderbilt's guarding Ant. But there's a cost to that too. I think if you're the Lakers, that I've come to appreciate more over the course of this week, where if Vanderbilt's out there, then they're putting Rudy on Vanderbilt. And then Rudy's roaming like he did against Aaron Gordon in the Denver series last year. And he's there to help and clog the lane and, because just basically provide permanent sort of like gap help against Luka Doncic, because they're like, well, if Luka wants to kick this out to Jared Vanderbilt in the corner, like, what are they, how many times do you want to do that? What percentage of the time is that going to go in? So I think there's an opportunity cost if you're the Lakers of, letting go of Hayes there, which is why I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I think that's really become an assumption in this. There's just going to be an offensive cost, I guess what I'm saying, from the Lakers side of it, I think, if they do that, because Now Vanderbilt is getting ignored. And then so he has to provide his offensive value kind of in the same Rudy way, where it's like, you got to be finishing those drop offs in the dunker spot. You got to get 4 or 5 offensive rebounds if you're Vanderbilt to, kind of, I think, counterbalance some of that there. I'm just really curious to see not like when that chess move happens. Well, I guess when it happens, but how long do you wait to do that? How committed are they to playing big on the Lakers side? And how can the Wolves exploit that? Either way, right? Like if Hayes is out there and he's playing in a drop, like let's go, Ant. That's got to be, let's set high screens all day, like walk in threes, right? Like that's what that has to be. But and then conversely, Vanderbilt's on him. They're going to be guarding him very differently if it's Vanderbilt or Hayes out there. So it's two really, to me, very like polarizing paths that they can choose just based on kind of how they're approaching the center position. So yeah, I think that's a very good place to look for the first chess move.
And I kind of flirted with this at the top, and this isn't like bulletin board material. I want your real opinion on it because I don't know if you've really addressed it. The Lakers got Luka, and they're set up for the next decade. Like I would be jealous if I was any other fan base of how they're set up. Mm-hmm. But it's not a hot take, right, to say that this Laker team is simply not as good right now as that Mavs team. Mm-hmm. I just think like they're right. I mean, is that crazy? I mean, I know Austin Reeves has been phenomenal. It's like most improved player candidate. The backcourt partner for Luka last year was Kyrie, right? And they had just a ton of bigs that they could kind of just rotate in and out. I mean, Gafford kind of gets forgotten about how good he was in that Wolves-Mavs series. The Lakers just don't have that. And they have different strengths for sure, right? Their three-point shooting is probably light years better than what the Mavs was last year. But I just say that because when it comes back to the Wolves, who play a little more traditional with 2 bigs and, size matters and all that stuff, they need to not only like they're going to play big, and I think they're going to try to stick with that and not be the first chess move and downshift, to 2 power forwards. But when Rudy's out there or when Julius, all those guys, like they just need to be really dominant offensively to punish, because again, you're giving up some stuff defensively by maybe making Rudy chase to the corner, all that stuff. But offensively, like they're giving you up something too. And I think that's my frustration that's getting lost in all this is this Lakers Wolves matchup is like people are talking like it's one of the Paul brother fights where it's like, they're just setting it up. They'll show up, they'll get paid, they'll leave, they win. That's not what this should be. And I think it's going to be fascinating because each team does have a pretty easy lever to pull in their starting lineup. Mike, I think, is just a perfect guy to be like, you know what, I'll take my medicine, I'll go to the bench. And then the Lakers, Jackson Hayes is just not a big piece for them. So I think the coaching dynamics of this are going to be fascinating because I think it is, despite what maybe some people think here locally, I think these are 2 really, really top 10 NBA coaches. And to see how they go game in and game out, trying to strategize is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I have another Finch Redick thing, but let's grab our first break here to let y'all know that today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino and the Parlay Lounge at Treasure Island is your place to watch all Timberwolves and Wild playoff games. All of the games will be in parlay, and TI will be running drink specials during every game. This is the big one. Treasure Island has a ticket for you to go to a road playoff game. It's actually 2 people. It's a fully funded road trip that includes airfare for 2, lodging for 2 nights, and 2 tickets to see the Timberwolves in Los Angeles or the Wild in Las Vegas. If you come to these watch parties, as like when Kyle and I did one there a couple weeks ago, they gave away like a signed Anthony Edwards jersey. Well, it is a little bit bigger of a prize, I think. It is a fully funded trip to for Timberwolves fans to LA for this Wolves Lakers series. So you're going to want to go to the official watch party at Treasure Island for game 2 and hopefully win yourself a fully funded road trip to LA for, I'm assuming that'll be game 5 or 7. Stay tuned to TICasino.com for more information. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. And the 2 that I really like for game 1 is Rudy Gobert, more than 24 points plus rebounds plus assists. I think that assumes he is going to be played off. That's kind of a low number for him. And then I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is being looked at as like pretty clearly the 8th man in the series. He's only at 12 points plus rebounds plus assists. I like both of those to be more thans for those guys. Do you have anything that you've saw, Kyle?
Yeah, a quick reminder that this is.
We lost Kyle there for a second. You're all right. This is with this prizepicks.com or the prize picks app. You can use promo code Dane to when you place your first $50 lineup, or when you place your first $5 lineup, your account will be accredited with $50 when you do that. It's really fun for the playoffs, whether it be for the Wolves games, you want something else going on there, but I think for other games as well, we can this is a fun way to play prize picks. And you know this team well. Try it out. prizepicks.com, prize picks app. We got your mic back working over there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this is coming out on a Thursday, but game 1 on Saturday, right? Tomorrow, Flex Friday at Prize Picks. Just go click the opt-in button for Flex Friday and make an entry. And I think there's some cool Rui Hachimura squares because I think he's going to be the X factor for this Lakers team too. So yeah, use Dane's promo code. Invest a little bit in this series. A series that's going to be really fun, and in a series that, going back to what we were just talking about before the break, I think is going to be determined by the 2 head coaches.
So I asked Finch yesterday, I was thinking about it because I was just thinking about the Redick versus Finch matchup, if you want to call it that. And you know, I think the public perception, if you just, I don't know, polled NBA fans, would say JJ Redick is a better coach and that the Lakers have that advantage there. I don't know if it's because he had a podcast or they've just heard him more talk about X's and O's than they have Finch. And you know, and Finch has had, you know, some struggles in the playoffs as well, going back to the beginning. But I was thinking about the fact that this is Finch's, I think, 6th playoff series that he's coached, and that's a difference than Redick, who obviously played in many. I'm not taking anything away from. He's like, but there's just an experience factor that is different for Finch. I asked Finch at practice yesterday about his experience and growth going back 4 years of playoffs. Now here's Finch.
Chris, this is your 6th, I think, playoff series for you. Just as an individual yourself, like, what do you think about that first Memphis series? What that was like for you preparing for it, where you were at versus now with a lot of reps coaching in playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. Like, it's always been fun. You know, even as an assistant coach, you know, kind of game plan, figure it out, install it, you know, tweak it, and then after game 1, you throw it all out and just make adjustments. You know, that's fun. I think we're pretty confident, you know, with our ability to come up with the good game plans and feel that we can sell it to the guys and they can be happy and believe in it. That's really what it comes down to. You know, we look forward to it. You know, we look forward to again. I think the adjustment part's also pretty fun. You know, and our guys are definitely super engaged in this series. So yeah, looking back at that first one, obviously there's just a lot of excitement to be there and everything. But you know, I thought we did a good job even back then of doing what we were able to do with the roster that we had. So.
I think, Kyle, one thing reflecting on last season's playoffs, and particularly, you know, that Phoenix series and the week up that they had in advance of that, and they lost to Phoenix last year all 3 times during the regular season, and it seemed going into round 1 that Phoenix had a pretty clear and successful game plan of how to guard Anthony Edwards, and the Wolves took that week to impart a strategy for countering that, and it stuck. It landed with the players, and they did execute it there. And I think that shows an example of Finch's strategies resonating with the group and being able to be executed. You know, and defensively in that series, you're opting to have Cat on KD. You go, you know, but you kind of figured out the ripple effect of that. Okay, if we do this, then this, and this can happen. You go to the Denver series, and they did the strategy of putting Cat on Jokic and having Gobert lurk off of Aaron Gordon, and they executed that as well. So I don't anybody can have a differing of opinion of what a coach is doing is right or wrong, and that's fair, and you can critique that sort of stuff. But a big part of coaching in the NBA is, can you get your players to actually do what you have decided the game plan to be is? You know, we do all this stuff with like, oh, you tweak this lineup here, and when the coverage is loaded up on this side, a lot of it is just, will the players do what the plan is. And, I would have had questions about that with Finch prior to last season, but last season happened. And those things did sink in with the group. And that should be accounted for in this series. And I think make it so we're not viewing this as some like massive coaching discrepancy in this series.
I think it's pretty clear that the Timberwolves have more adjustments that they can make, but I think Redick and the Lakers are more comfortable making their adjustments. I just think Redick is, again, a really good coach, and I think if he has to pull the plug, like the Steven Adams thing you referenced in the Grizzlies series, and he's like, hey, Jackson Hayes, you just don't play anymore, that's done, right? And it'll happen, and they'll move forward. I do think as pro Finch as I've been, at least in the regular season specifically, like he's been a little more just hard and fast in terms of doing what he wants to do and playing the long game. Well, that doesn't exist anymore, right? There is no long game. Every game is its own battle in this war. And I think as frustrating as this regular season has been, again, with new chess pieces and trying to make them work and fit, when you think big picture in terms of this playoff stuff, it's like, yeah, dude, this is the fourth straight season they've made the playoffs. And when they were a play-in team, they had less time to figure it all out. It didn't always go well. And then last year they had that week off. And I just think they scouted the hell out of the Suns and they had every right lever ready to pull. So this is a completely different matchup. There are some similarities, I think, with that Suns team and this Lakers team, but how accepting, I've called him pretty frustrating at times because he just likes to be in his ways, but how open will Finch be if he notices early on that there's just, we have to pivot? Will he pivot, or is he going to stick to kind of that conservative nature that we saw during the first 82 games?
I mean, at least going off that quote, you said, game one, and then you kind of throw it all out and you
right.
But you're right to point out that during the regular season, that has not been the approach. They would stick with something for an extended period of time and then make a tweak off of it. You think about the starting lineup when Conley was struggling, right? It took a long time before making a change to DiVincenzo. Obviously, that changed back eventually, but they could have said maybe we should let that go a little bit earlier. But there's been other examples over the course of the season, I think, that have paid dividends due to Finch having a long view there. And yeah, I don't know, maybe it's apples and oranges, regular season, playoffs. We'll see. But a fact is that Chris Finch has more head coaching experience in the playoffs than JJ Redick, and I'm not sure that even really gets a lot of notice at all when people are talking about these two coaches in this series. You got another one for us?
Yeah, this one, when I sent you this, you're like, isn't that kind of common knowledge? And I agree, but I do think it's worth mentioning because on the Lakers side, it's actually like a conversation, and I get it, but I just texted you, like, what version of Ant would the Lakers not prefer? And I just gave you examples of like 42 point a game Ant, or more like 28, 9, and 8 Ant. So, like just the high volume score, like I got this, that we've seen from him before, and it's worked occasionally, or more of that well-rounded two-way type guy. I mean, again, just saying it out loud, it sounds obvious, but and then Ant kind of addressed that question this week too. So I just like, what version of Ant gives the Wolves the better chance here to pull this upset?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the nature of this team, given that they have another like isolation heavy player in Julius Randle, who's going to play a lot of minutes, given that they have some other offensive players that need to be spoon fed largely to score in McDaniels and Gobert, that this series is asking for the primary handler to be more of a guy that's flirting with a triple double than a guy who's flirting with 50. And so if I am the Lakers, that I understand wanting to not let Ant get into some sort of rhythm. And I understand, I'm sure what they'll do is just like load up that gap help behind a somewhat weak point of attack defender against him. And, that coverage kind of does dare Ant to pass. But I think if they do that, it's them not having a belief that Ant will do that for 48 minutes, that he won't do that in the crucible of a playoff series against LeBron and Luka. But I think if I'm the Lakers, I know that I'm in trouble if after game one, Ant had 29, 9, and 9. That because I don't know how Ant gets 29, 9, and 9 without Rudy Gobert having been that impactful version of himself around the basket without Jaden McDaniels having knocked down 2 or 3 open corner threes. That's how you lose to this Wolves team that is volatile offensively. The best offensive games for this team are not the best offensive games from Anthony Edwards oftentimes, right?
Bingo.
And right, and so yeah, if I'm the Lakers, I prefer Ant to be in hero mode and maybe even successful hero mode rather than being an includer in this.
I mean, JJ Redick wants Ant to take 13, 14 threes and just be kind of perimeter based. Because again, as we just talked about before, if the Lakers do say, hey, our best recipe here is to play small, well, you've seen what it's like when there's no rim protection, right? Like Ant just needs to get downhill, put pressure on everyone in front of him. They play good defense, or they have good defensive principles, especially with their gap help, but they don't have great on-ball defenders, right? I mean, we're talking about guys like who are good, like Vando and Finney Smith and even Rui, but those guys aren't on a level of defender come playoff time that like really can. They're not Lou Dort, right? They're not Dylan Brooks. So
they're the guys that you have to put gap help behind, right? It's just kind of like this idea of like, we know that I was just like rewatching that game when they played them with Luka, like they knew and they like kind of willingly switched. They were like, okay, Luka's guys in here for the screen, like Luka switch on to Ant. Like they aren't afraid of that because then they're just going to pull in the 2 other wing defenders into the elbows, and they're actually not that concerned about Luka at the point of attack because they know they have that behind them. It's just it's them being real with what the personnel is. Now, I think Vanderbilt is different than that. I think Vanderbilt, it is a little bit more of the Dort like archetype, right? Where if I'm the Lakers, then I'm telling my guys, okay, maybe it's not the elbows we're getting all the way into. Let's trust Vando to be able to turn Ant here, to be able to pester him, to be able to, like, Vando's job in that situation is, can I get Ant to pass the ball here without help? The gap help is there to make Ant pass, period, but it's more advantageous if Vanderbilt can just handle that there. The real question for Ant, I think, is like, it's going to be a bunch of different shit, and what is he going to be able to, in his Rolodex in his head, cycle through, okay, this is what it is now. This is what it is now. Because even in that game, it's like Jackson Hayes is out there. All right, now they're in a drop. They would switch, like, sometimes LeBron would be up to touch on the perimeter. Sometimes LeBron would be back in a drop when his man screened. It's so much about Ant being like, this is what they're doing here with this personnel. How am I playing off of that? And that's tough. And that has not been a strength of his, but it has been improving over the course of this season. He was asked about it at practice yesterday.
One lineup where they probably play a little bit more drop, and you might see some of that, and then somebody subs out, and now they're in the gaps.
Right.
Switching and everything, like just making those adjustments on the fly.
Just reading and react pretty much. Seeing how they sub, seeing who comes in the game. Being ready. Jackson Hayes may be in a high wall. He may blitz me. He may be in a drop. So, like I said, just reading and reacting. And then they sub him out. Vando, they may blitz me or be heavy in the gaps. Like I said, just being able to trust my teammates. It's kind of similar to the Finch series last year. Like, they was overly doubling me and stuff, and I didn't let it bother me. Just passing the ball, letting the game come to me, and then finding my spots as I go.
So much with like the getting off of it is how quick you do it. How much does like a week of practice help? Like all those
it helps a lot. It helps a lot because today I was a little rusty turning the ball over, and they was heavy in the gaps. So I was a little rusty today, and coach was getting mad at me. So it helps a lot. It makes me knock the rust off for sure.
I do think that's an interesting thing, Kyle, about like that coverage in particular is like when you are loaded in the gaps like that, it is a lot of like, I'm trying to force a turnover here. If I'm Austin Reeves here in the gap, right? And it's a little bit of a gamble to that. I think of that coverage and that move because, if Ant's going downhill and, and he gets like stripped by Reeves and the call isn't there, well, that taps into one of the X factors of the Lakers. So now they're going the other direction. They're playing in transition, and I think a big part of this just period with Ant is regardless of what the coverage is, can I control the ball? Can I control the ball here? There's going to be the temptation to go through the gap help, to split a pick and roll coverage when they're playing up there. Well, it's got to be a little bit of give and take because when you try and throw that like dribble through to split the pick, I mean, that's a tough move. He could do it. Ant could get through boxes and elbows defense there, but when he does that stuff, oftentimes it's turnovers too. So that's part of this balance here. And it's just got to be a constant calculation of like, what can I do that is getting us good shots frequently and not turning the ball over? There does need to be a little bit of game management when he's at the top there. When he's on the side, right? Like pin down for him coming across there, grab, go, get there before the defensive set. Anytime the defense isn't loaded in the gaps or ready to execute their coverage, Ant, go. This is a go quick series for him, but it's not a go into a crowd series, regardless of what the coverage is, because I think that's how he could get in trouble with turnovers, and then the Wolves could get in trouble with their transition defense.
To steal a phrase from a popular podcast formerly hosted by the head coach and one of the best players on the Lakers, mind the game. This is all going to be a mental thing for Ant. And I know you're at practice every day this week. I mean, you can kind of comment on this, but I feel like he has said all the right things and said things that he just didn't say 2 years ago. Right. And my only question is, and I'm optimistic, I'm not being pessimistic, but you need to ask it, is everything he just said in that clip, how long will he cling to that? Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you lose game 1 by 15, but you played the right way, will you trust the long game within the short game of, I think you and Britt were talking about this, getting off the ball doesn't mean in a possession, that's it. Finch wants you to get off the ball or make the right read so that you have this advantage so that when the ball comes back to Ant, he just has an easier opportunity to score, to get to the rim, to get to his spots, whatever. So I was really impressed by everything he said. He seems really locked in. Obviously, this week is really big for a team that just notoriously doesn't pay close attention to detail or, do all those little things. But I'm going to be fascinated by, if the Lakers throw a zone, right? They watch that Bucks tape and they're like, all right, gap help and all that other stuff, but let's just put our 5 guys in zone. Mm-hmm. How much will Ant be able to dissect that? Because he has all the physical skills and the speed and the athleticism and the shot making. I mean, just a quick 10-second interlude. I can't believe the guy that you and I scouted so hard in 2020 during COVID led the league in threes. Like, that's crazy, right? Like, his game just continues to evolve in every skill set. But the one that still has the most work to do is the mental side of it. And if he can dissect, you said he's got to go quick. Can he process quick? That's going to be the biggest thing I'm looking at with him, because if he can process quick and all Redick's adjustments don't really slow him down, again, they don't have anyone, Vando maybe their best, they don't have anyone that can shut him down like maybe the Mavs tried to do with some of their better, bigger defenders.
Yeah, I thanks for bringing up I would recommend anybody listening. We played some clips here, but you can go to the Timberwolves YouTube channel and, watch Ant's whole media availability from Wednesday afternoon. And he did, to Kyle's point, sounds super locked in of understanding what the assignment was and is. And just something I've learned, like covering the NBA over the years, and specifically Ant, is these games come so fast during the regular season that there is actually very little game plan install that happens, in the NBA. I mean, I know Ant and all the players, they have their designated like film time before the game, and Ant sitting there with C. Hines, but that's like 90 minutes before tip, like, well, this is how they cover this, this is how they do this. This is how they've done this. Or last time they guarded you, this is what that looked like. And I think that helps. But I think that's a very, very different way of teaching Ant about what is going on than having 3-4 days of practice to do so. And I've, again, just anecdotally from covering him for his whole career, we've done a handful of interviews with him on days when he was just in a film session or it was after a practice. Yeah. And those interviews sounded more like yesterday. And what he was saying, he just had a better understanding of what it was. We've talked to him plenty of other times and he just, hadn't studied it yet. He didn't know, what it was that they were doing. And my point is, I think when Ant has had things presented to him repeatedly and over a longer period of time with real preparation time, that the likelihood that he is going to be playing a higher IQ game, a faster processing game is up. And again, I would point to last season's playoffs as an example of that, a proof of that concept. That's what happened. They had the week off before Phoenix. That made a difference for Ant being able to understand how to play against and beat this gap help look that the Suns ran, and I would assume the Lakers will lean into heavily. It did during this season. That stuff matters to all players. I think that matters with Ant a lot at 23 and younger in his career. And this stuff he didn't come into the NBA with this being a 10 out of 10 to his game. He wouldn't say that. His interviews say, I wasn't good at that before. I was one-dimensional player. I'm learning. That's just the truth of what it was with Ant. He was 10 of 10 athletically, had all this potential. He did not have that. That has been something that has been a slower burn for him. But if you give it time, history has shown he's more likely to be able to execute those things. And I think JJ Redick and them know that. And it's why if I'm the Lakers, I'm shuffling. I am just
exactly
confused. That is the goal against Ant. It's not to stop him. It would be, for me, it would be to confuse him.
Because I think when the Suns' strategy of all the gap help last year, which kind of helped them sweep the Wolves in the regular season, when that was solved early on in game 1 of Wolves Suns, they didn't have they couldn't shuffle. They didn't really have any other options, right? And that team, that Phoenix Suns team, just didn't have the defensive pieces that this Lakers team does. So if Ant solves, the Lakers version of gap help in game 1 at some point, or maybe early game 2, the Lakers will have other things that they can throw at him. Again, I reference, you don't think Redick and those 42 coaches in the bowels of Staples Center have watched that Bucks-Wolves game 40 times?
The Grizzlies did it, so.
Well, I don't know who coaches the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
So they will have other ways. And I think the shuffling part, that's what, conversely, you talk about how this is going to be my last question, like how you defend Luka, is you just have to throw so many different languages at him that when he's trying to interpret the communication, he's like, okay, now this is Spanish, this is French, this is Portuguese. Like for Ant, they're going to do that same thing. And how quickly can he pick that stuff up and figure it out? Because every other player on this team, you can do a bunch of different X factor questions, narratives, whatever. But if he can't solve that stuff, I think the domino effect is just doom.
Yeah. Let me do just like an X factor. It's not a question.
Sweet.
It's just Naz Reid and Donte DiVincenzo. That's the Wolves have a leg up in this series on the bench. The Wolves have a very, very good bench. I think anybody who watched them over the course of this season would be extremely impressed by what happens when Naz Reid, Donte DiVincenzo, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are on the floor, particularly when multiple of them are on the floor or all three of them are on the floor together. We rolled our eyes at the 8 starters thing earlier in the season because we wanted more players to play, but it doesn't make it untrue that they have 8 starter caliber players. And I just think with Naz and Donte in particular, when they're on the floor, that's when the identity of this team flips, into more of a explosive offensive team. And particularly in the minutes when Gobert is not on the floor, that it is, and normally it's Randall out there, right? It's Reid and Randall are your front court. But I was just looking at it and it's like, they've had very similar success when it's Gobert, Reid, and DiVincenzo on the floor, just from how much they win by net rating standpoint, plus 8.5 when those guys are out there. But when it's Reid, DiVincenzo, and no Gobert, they have a net rating of plus 7.3. Very similar, right? That's both high level. Those are very winning teams. The interesting part about it is the offensive rating is so much worse when Gobert is out there, yet the defense is so much better. The offensive rating is 111.8 when Gobert is out there with them, and the defensive rating is 103.3. That is an elite defense, bad offense. You take it when it's Reid, DiVincenzo, and no Gobert, the Wolves are 122.1 offensive rating, which is like would be better than the best team in the league. And then defensively, they're really mediocre, 114.8. I think it's important to have both of those gears. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I just think those numbers tell us what those gears are. And it is like, yeah, Rudy's not out here. We're going to get scored on, but we're going to score too. Not forgetting about defense. You still got to play defense there, but leaning into those Reid and DiVincenzo minutes and leaning into the free-flowing offense and the pace and the spread of the game, that comes with that. They need that gear too, and that gear is unleashed by the presence of Naz Reid and Donte DiVincenzo.
As I get older, I don't really subscribe so much to the idea of like who has the best player in this series, who has the second best player. I think that's like a football thing with quarterbacks, but in this series and what you just said, Luka, Austin Reeves, Rui, LeBron, maybe Jackson Hayes, the starters, that's pretty good. But the benches are a massive, massive thing to keep an eye on because, they bring in Gabe Vincent and Vando and Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, they just don't have that level
I do
of...
kind of like Jordan Goodwin. I don't know if
with or without a mask. Like, the Wolves bring in guys that, again, who has a better feel for... When I was thinking about this Bucks game again, of like, they really started to cook, right? Donte and Nas running high pick and roll. I think the bench unit hit 4 or 5 straight threes to really balloon that lead against the Bucks. But then they were also kind of out there when it started to go away. So I think, again, back to Finch, I mean, I had a question just that I think about all the time of like, who has the most pressure on them in this series? And I think there are some people on the Lakers that LeBron at 40, he's running out of opportunities to win a title. But on the Wolves side, Chris Finch needs to know when to give those dogs on the bench a long leash, but also avoid some of the pitfalls that he's had in the regular season of, if you can sense that it's just this stint's not Nas's stint, to pull it quickly. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you, though. When those guys come in, and maybe it won't be the hockey subs of like, okay, Nikhil, Donte, and Nas are all on at the scorer's table. We're doing 3 new guys in. Maybe they'll be staggered a little more to kind of change up the pattern of the rotation. But when those guys come in, I think they embrace chaos. I think they love playing faster, being more chaotic. And I think that's a wrinkle that is so different than what the Wolves starting 5 kind of shows you.
Yeah, related to the pressure thing, I was talking to an executive from a different team yesterday about Nas Reid, and it's kind of about like the free agency and stuff like that. And it's just one person's opinion, so, or whatever, take on the situation. But he brought up the idea of like Nas being under pressure in this series as well, and just given kind of the funky nature of the free agency market this summer, like for a team, an external team, to really pay him, they're going to need to go out of their way to be able to do that with sign and trades, or, finding ways to finagle cap space for that. And that's just like a little bit more of a bar that you need to like get to, so as, if you're the team, so as to be able to throw Nas that $100 million contract. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what his theory was, is it's like, I think Nas is only going to get that if he really shows something in this playoffs, and within a playoff concept of being a 20-something million dollar player in against the Lakers or whoever that, if they win and whoever they play next. And I mean, if that is true, if that theory has some truth to it, Nas's agent knows that, Nas knows that, and there's an element of, a pressure behind that just would be human if it were you and I too, and be like, and then you start thinking about, the clock's running down and you're like, it's the fourth quarter, I've only played 18 minutes. Like what, there's some of those factors, I think, specific to Nas in this series that are just an unfortunate reality of having players on, expiring contracts. When you just in general, players are thinking about other things when that happens, and Nas's ability to kind of let that empower him versus cloud him, I think that's a big factor related to this X factor.
Once these games start on Saturday, you and I and you and the rest of the crew are going to be doing a lot of pods. And I really, if I can, just for a second, the reason you're the best at this is because you really do talk about the basketball, and we're going to talk a lot basketball starting Saturday night in LA. But I also think you're naive, not you, but in general, you're naive if you don't think all this other stuff plays a massive role now when the lights are really bright.
Yeah. And
I didn't want to do an X Factor at the top of this show, a basketball podcast about this stuff, but man, like half of this rotation is in a contract here. Yep. Julius and Nas and Nikhil, and on the other side, like Luka. And when you ask those questions of, who has the most pressure on him, I mean, you probably don't care about that today on Thursday, but when it's game 2 or game 3, and like you said, you haven't played a lot, or you're trying to like, I got to make a real impact right now. I think that stuff is also going to play into this. And last year, when this team made the deepest run they made in 20 years, no one worried about a contract because everyone was set. Everyone was good. This is different. And I think that will be something to monitor. They've said all the right things. Julius said this week in his media availability, I know this didn't go well on the East Coast, but that this is maybe the best. Yeah, that this was maybe the best opportunity, the best team he's had. right? And again, like he was on some good Knicks teams. He was the face of that thing, but he really sees what I think Mike Conley sees, and obviously Rudy Gobert. But guys like Nikhil, guys like Nas that do come off the bench, they're not guaranteed minutes in terms of like high volume minutes. How will they react if early on in this series they're not getting so much run? Are they going to try to put too much pressure on themselves? And that's another dynamic of this whole series.
Finch had a little interesting thing about DiVincenzo and Nas and the rotation yesterday when I asked about them at practice.
I think we can do with those guys is, maybe stagger their entry into the game, because they often come in and they're kind of looking for the same things at the same time. And maybe they cannibalize each other just a little bit. I've thought about that for a lot coming down the stretch of the season. I know that's one thing you could do for those guys. But we need those guys to come in and be who they are at a high level. That's one of our great strengths, is that experience and the depth and the shooting that those guys bring.
Just like start one of them, bro. I know we're too far gone from that, and they're committed to this sort of thing. But it's like, oh yeah, they're cannibalizing each other. I got an idea. No, I'm kidding. I get it, and I do know why they have started Mike, and that taps into Gobert, and I get it. It's just, man, it's just another example of like this roster is funky, man. It just doesn't, like, the Lego pieces don't quite click together. I don't know what that means in practice. We'll learn in game one. Typically how it works. Right, is 6 minutes into the game or the third quarter too. That's when Reid and DiVincenzo come in, and Conley and Randall leave the game. Does that mean, I don't know, does that bring Donte in earlier, bring Mike out earlier? So you kind of cycle Mike back into the rotation for his second shift against the Gabe Vincents or whatever. But it makes sense that he's been thinking about it. And I would just point out it's something that they haven't done. They have not staggered those guys, and given each of their individual offensive forces, I mean, they are two of the most prolific volume 3-point shooters in the league. We've talked about that a lot with Ant, because he's became the one, other than Steph Curry. But as far, was it maybe? No, sorry. Malik Beasley would be the most prolific bench 3-point shooter in the league this season. But are DiVincenzo and Nas not both top 5 in their own? How many teams have that? Have one of those guys at that volume and at that distance that they can shoot, shoot from? So I think it is important to have them both out there together. But I get the idea of staggering them too. So we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, I actually think the Minnesota Timberwolves don't have a lot of personality when you average it out. I mean, they have maybe the most personality player in the league in Anthony Edwards, but I mean, a lot of the other guys are pretty quiet. Jaden, Mike, like Rudy, Julius. When they bring these guys off the bench, all three of those guys, those 6, 7, and 8 starters, have big personalities and energies in terms of they can really change the style of fight in an instant. I mean, the Wolves starting 5 we've watched all season, like they do kind of play a certain way, and it's kind of, you can kind of expect, and it's reliable, and sometimes not to the best detriment for them. But when you bring in Nikhil and Donte and Nas, and if you shift how they come in and they're not all coming at the same time, and you kind of integrate them in a more organic way, that is exciting to me. To your point, though, how much can you shift those guys' roles or appearances in a game when you really didn't lean into that much during the regular season? I think that's going to be super telling. Like, can you get those guys to kind of change their mindset a little bit in 1 week of practice instead of 6.5 months of regular season action? So that will be another thing I'm looking at. But if I'm Nas Reid, I mean, Donte is his own beast and Nikhil stuff, but I just think Nas Reid, this is a big moment for him because he has a lot of potential money on the table. He's got, I mean, there's so many things, right? Starting spots. Does he stay here again? All that stuff. I just think he is at his best, similar to Ant. He doesn't want to overthink it when he's just playing, as we always say, Iowa Wolves basketball, just free flowing with confidence, with energy, with athleticism. If he starts overthinking it, that every miss he has is going to hurt his pockets, that is going to drown him. So he's another guy. I mean, there's a lot of X factors. We could do 60 of them, but how he comes in and plays alongside Julius or alongside Rudy, against smaller front courts for the Lakers is going to be fascinating.
Do you have any more? I have one left.
I have something else at the end, but no, that was kind of all my burning questions. So you hit me with yours.
I just do this one quickly. I mean, I think this is a stupid question, but it's a way for me to play this clip. The question I wrote down is, does being the underdog actually help this team? Mostly just because Rudy said this.
All the underdogs, and it's fine. I think we have a lot of guys in this locker room that have been underdogs their whole life. So it's a position that we embrace, and I think we embrace it individually and collectively. So it's in a way in a place where we have the opportunity to show who we are over and over.
I mean, obviously, Kyle, we can go back to the first round series against Phoenix. They were underdogs, seemed to take pride in that and taking care of that in 4 games. Also, the Denver series, there was a lot of nobody picked us energy. And then we've seen them play the Washington Wizards and the Utah Jazz this season where everybody picked them and they did not win. There is inherently a trait within this team that is about they take, lesser opponents lighter, and that I think is that's tattooed onto Ant's game right now at 23 years old. We just finished him very much vacillate his intention on a night-to-night basis based on the opponent. But I do think there is another side to that coin, and it's this. It is the idea that they do kind of relish. He, in particular, I think kind of relishes in some of the idea that nobody is picking him. People don't believe in him. People do see flaws in his game. And I think Ant kind of loves that. And for Rudy, I think it's actually the way that him and Rudy are one of the areas they're most similar is nobody's ever picked Rudy to be good at anything. Everybody, right? It is Rudy's playing now. They could go small. Rudy's team loses, I mean, it's Rudy is an underdog in the NBA because he is as underappreciated as he's been, because his flaws are, when they show up, define him in ways that, honestly, with Ant, it's the complete opposite way. Ant has serious end of game issues, but Kendrick Perkins is that's my clutch player of the year. It is a fascinating thing to somebody to write an awesome article on someday of the way in which Ant is perceived and the disconnect between what he's actually doing and what people are saying he's doing versus Rudy. I mean, I don't know how Rudy doesn't just hate everyone just for the way that he's been, covered nationally and that sort of way. But I think there is something collective there. My point is of being the underdog and showing up and overcoming. I think there is some truth to the idea that they feed off of that, even if that is, in many ways a cliche.
You mentioned the Wizards or the Bucks without Giannis and Dame, but to build off kind of your analogy or your statement, they were very much underdogs against the Suns. The betting market agreed. They were very much underdogs against the Nuggets. And then the way in which they beat the Nuggets made them, whether they're betting odds or not, favorites against the Mavs. That's why, they had home court. And as soon as that flip switch to hey, this team actually is going to the finals, and they started to kind of, smell their own farts a little bit, then it just all cratered. And I think we're back to, that's what I've been saying. Rudy said it at the top, Lion King. It is time. They're back to square one. They're coming off a Western Conference Finals trip with most of the same guys and coaching staff and everything. And it does seem like everyone is just kind of gentleman's sweep. How do the Lakers match up in the second round? And I really do believe that a week of that and the way that the star player on this team has kind of always defied the odds and always been doubted, I think that's a real thing that they're going to carry with them to LA.
I don't know what the way you wanted to wrap this up, but wrap this up for us.
I got up at 5 a.m. today just because I really am excited about this basketball series. I just didn't have a lot of respect for the Suns last year. I think dude, we've been doing this now for 8 years, but like I got into basketball, I know, watching MJ on WGN Channel 5 in the Midwest. Like that was my first interaction with basketball. But dude, we're watching the team we cover against LeBron James, right? Like this is the Wolves Lakers are going to be crazy. So I just had a couple random numbers that I wanted to throw out that maybe you'll know, maybe you won't. But 1948 was the first time the Minneapolis Lakers won a championship. I think they had a mini dynasty. They won 3 in a row. 1960, the Lakers moved to LA. They brought 6 championship banners with them from, I guess, Target Center. Elgin Baylor, Jerry West. May 1st, 2003, Lakers eliminate the Wolves in the first round of the playoff series. That was the first time those two teams had matched up since the Wolves and Lakers had been created. May 31st, 2004. That's when the Wolves lost to the Lakers. Remember the Gary Payton, Karl Malone team? Again, Wolves can't make the finals. Kevin Garnett's really good last year here. March 9th, 2012. That was the night Ricky Rubio tore his ACL against the Los Angeles Lakers. Quick math, California has about 3,000 lakes. Minnesota has, as you know. It's time. It's time. Again, if you are... if you voted Minnesota Mike, or you're a Rob Dillingham Muse, or you prefer Mike Honore over Chris Finch, or you miss Cat and you don't like Julius, like all that shit will get figured out this summer. This is the most comfortable I've been because it's back to Wolves versus everybody. There's no one picking the Wolves to win this series. Jim Pete tweeted out the other day, every single person that has a platform is picking the Lakers, probably in 5, and they're just giving the Wolves a game. I think this team is so comfortable in that setting and in that mentality. And now let's see what kind of chess pieces Chris Finch can use. He has more coaching experience. They have more depth. They have the defensive player of the year 4 times out. And they might have, after this series, we'll see. It's not the odds right now, but they might be able to 2 weeks from now say we had the best player in the series. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited. We kicked this thing off 6 months ago in LA, and we're going to kick it off again in LA this weekend. But you're a professional. I'm not, but I feel comfortable legitimately saying Wolves in 6.
Love it, dude. Love it. Kyle and I will be in LA. Kyle's going to be there as well. For the playoffs, we try to do post-game pods with some of these like 9:30 starts or 8:30 starts that might get tricky later in the series. But for game 1's on Saturday, me, Kyle, and Britt will do a post-game pod right after that one. So just know for the postseason, as long as it goes, we're going to try and do post-game pods right after them. So they're up in your feed, first thing in the morning or by, 8, 9 a.m. Central Time if we can. And maybe if there's one really late one, we might wait and do it record in the morning. But I'm looking forward to this. This was super fun to do the post-game pods with Kyle and Britt last season too. It's a little bit more of a, that just happened, and we sit down and I haven't got to write down all my notes and everything, but I'm really looking forward to it too. Looking forward to hanging out with you in LA for a week as well. And let's see where this thing goes. You got anything else before we sign up?
Just this quote that's always stuck with me from a famous Lakers fan and also a spokesperson for Skims. Use promo code Dane. I didn't come this far just to come this far. It's been a hell of a season, lots up and down. Started with that Cat trade, but all of that pushed to the side for a couple weeks. I'm excited for 1 and 2 in LA. I'm really excited for 3 and 4 next weekend in Minneapolis because this fan base deserves to go back and get their banners back, right? Get their mojo back against the team that was born here and then left. So Wolves Lakers, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, I think Saturday night, game 1 will be in attendance, and let's see what happens.
Love it. It'll be Kyle, Britt, and I on Sunday morning for the next episode. Until then, he's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah.